Historical document Ioannis, an eyewitness to Jesus, frequently corresponded with Caesar in Rome, as was customary for officials to report on significant matters in the provinces. The letter has fascinated both scholars and believers because it offers insights into the physical appearance and character of Jesus. Topics often debated and shrouded in mystery. Throughout history, Jesus has been depicted in many ways, with some of the most iconic images emerging in Western art. Particularly influential is Warner Salmon's Head of Christ from 1940, a portrayal that has become one of the most widely reproduced images of Jesus worldwide. Salmon, a former commercial artist, worked with Protestant and Catholic publishers to distribute this comforting and familiar image, which shows Jesus as a white man with soft features and gentle eyes. This portrayal, however, reflects a long-standing European tradition that sought to depict Christ in a way relatable to Western audiences rather than an accurate historical representation. In reality, the historical Jesus was a first-century Jew from Galilee and likely had darker skin and brown eyes typical of the region's inhabitants at the time. No images or portraits exist from Jesus's lifetime, so historians rely heavily on cultural and historical context to imagine his appearance. The Bible itself offers very few details about Jesus's physical features, while the Old Testament describes figures such as King Saul and King David as tall and handsome. No such description is given for Jesus. The prophet Isaiah's writings present contrasting views. On one hand, Isaiah describes the coming Savior as having no beauty or majesty that would attract people to him, implying a humble and unremarkable appearance. On the other hand, some psalms suggest he was fairer than other men. These differing descriptions have fueled speculation for centuries. The newly discovered letter from Ioannis, however, may provide the only known physical description of Jesus from someone who actually encountered him. The letter was found in a monastery along with other ancient documents and is believed to date from the 12th year of Emperor Tiberius's reign, roughly coinciding with the time of Jesus's ministry. Historical records verify that a Roman official named Ioannis was indeed present in Judea during the period of Jesus's trial and crucifixion. The Jewish historian Flavius Josephus even mentions an official by that name, lending some credibility to the letter's authenticity, though scholars continue to debate this. According to Ioannis, Jesus was a man of great power, known to Gentiles as the prophet of truth and to his disciples as the Son of God. He was reputed to have performed miraculous healings and even raised the dead. Ioannis describes Jesus as possessing a dignified countenance that inspired both love and fear. Physically, Jesus is said to have been of medium height, with hair the color of unripe hazelnuts, smooth and parted in the middle as was customary among the Nazarene Jews. His hair curled into darker shining locks that flowed over his shoulders. His brow was smooth and serene and his face flawless, radiating a healthy complexion. His nose and mouth were perfect in proportion, and his beard, matching the color of his hair, was short but fuller at the chin. His expression was simple but mature. His gray eyes were clear and penetrating, stern when rebuking but kind and loving in admonition. Though cheerful, he maintained an air of seriousness and was known to weep but never laugh. Further descriptions from Ioannis portrayed Jesus as tall and straight with fair hands and arms. In conversation, he was grave, reserved and modest, fitting the biblical description of being fairer than the children of men. Ioannis also notes Jesus's noble and lively face, slightly wavy fair hair, black curved eyebrows and intense gray eyes that exuded grace. His nose was long and his beard almost blonde, though not very long. His long hair framed a slightly inclined neck, giving him an appearance that was neither bitter nor arrogant. His complexion was compared to ripe corn, symbolizing wisdom, sweetness and goodness, with no trace of anger. This portrayal aligns closely with traditional images of Jesus and may have been written during his lifetime or shortly after, suggesting it could reflect an eyewitness's perspective. Similar detailed descriptions were also common among the Greeks, who often depicted the apostles and the Virgin Mary with a care and reverence reserved for heroes of their own myths, such as those of Troy. Early church fathers like Justin Martyr and Irenaeus referred to Isaiah's prophecy to argue Jesus's appearance was humble and unremarkable, emphasizing that he had no form nor glory and was without honor. Yet others pointed to contrasting texts like Psalm 45 verse 2, which describes Jesus as the most handsome of men, showing the variety in perception that likely reflected personal and spiritual connections to him. Saint Augustine famously remarked that each person imagines Jesus differently, emphasizing that salvation does not depend on Jesus's physical likeness but on faith in him as the Savior. Likewise, the 4th century Bishop Cyril of Jerusalem taught that Jesus appeared to people in various forms according to their needs, embodying different spiritual metaphors like a vine, a door, a priest, or a sacrificial lamb, always remaining true to his divine nature while adapting to human understanding. Interestingly, Early depictions of Jesus often portrayed him as a youthful Apollonian-like deity emphasizing divine beauty and power. However, after Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in the 4th century, the portrayal of Christ shifted dramatically toward a bearded figure with more human features. Some of the earliest images believed to be true likenesses of Jesus were regarded as miraculous arapoita, or images not made by human hands. One famous example is the Mandi lion, linked to the legend of Jesus healing King Abgar of Edessa, modern-day Turkey, through an image of his face. Similarly, the Western Christian tradition tells of the veil of Saint Veronica, which supposedly captured the holy face of Christ before his crucifixion. These relics and images became central to the tradition of depicting Jesus as a bearded man with shoulder-length hair. During the Renaissance, European artists blended these iconic images with their own creative interpretations, often incorporating their likenesses into paintings of Christ. This served multiple purposes. It allowed artists to identify with Christ's suffering and showcase their artistic skill. For example, the 15th century Sicilian painter Antello Dellina created intimate portraits of the suffering Christ, presenting him as an ordinary person with simple backgrounds, and signed paintings that read, "Antello Dellina painted me." Similarly, the 16th century German artist Ulrich Dürer famously created a self-portrait in 1500 resembling traditional images of Christ, complete with a beard and shoulder-length hair, and signed with his monogram Ad, which stood for both his name and Anno Domini. This blending of identities was not limited to Europe. In the 16th and 17th centuries, depictions of Jesus began to include figures from other regions such as Ethiopia and India. However, due to European trade, colonization, and missionary activity, the European image of a light-skinned Christ gradually became dominant worldwide. This influence shaped how millions came to visualize Jesus, despite the likelihood that his true appearance reflected the darker features of a 1st-century Middle Eastern Jew. The fascination with Jesus's physical appearance continues to intrigue scholars, theologians, and believers alike. The letter from Ioannis provides a compelling description but remains controversial, with some arguing that its details are too closely aligned with medieval European portrayals of Jesus, suggesting it might be a later fabrication rather than an authentic Roman-era document. Others believe that even if its origins cannot be fully verified, it still reflects an early tradition of how Jesus was remembered by those who encountered him. Regardless of its authenticity, the letter offers a unique perspective that differs from the countless artistic interpretations created over the centuries. As Christianity spread across different cultures, the image of Jesus adapted to reflect the people and traditions of each region. For example, ancient Christian art in Ethiopia depicted Jesus with African features, while early Christian communities in Asia portrayed him with characteristics resembling their own populations. This diversity of representation shows how Jesus has been embraced worldwide, each culture visualizing him in a way that resonates with their spiritual and personal experiences. Ultimately, whether Jesus had hazelnut-colored hair, a noble stature, or intense gray eyes is secondary to his message of love, forgiveness, and salvation. The importance of Jesus lies not in his physical attributes but in the profound impact he has had on humanity. He remains a figure of hope and faith for millions across the globe, transcending time, culture, and artistic interpretation. Believers anticipate the day when they will see Jesus as he truly is, beyond earthly depictions and limitations. Until then, his teachings continue to inspire and guide those on their journey of faith. In the end, Jesus Christ's physical appearance is not what truly matters. What matters is that all baptized believers can rest assured that one day, at the end of their earthly lives, they will see him face to face in a heavenly sanctuary. On that day, his true form may transcend any image or likeness we could ever imagine. The letter from Ioannis, whether entirely authentic or partly symbolic, invites us to reflect on the historical Jesus. The debate over the letter from Ioannis is part of a much larger discourse on how historical memory, theology, and cultural art intertwine to shape our perceptions of sacred figures. While some scholars see in the letter a genuine 1st-century account, albeit one filtered through layers of translation, redaction, and interpretation, others argue that its stylized tone and idealized physical descriptions suggest a document written or embellished during the medieval period. Despite these doubts, the fascination persists, not solely because of its potential authenticity but because it captures a desire shared by generations of believers to know what Jesus looked like, to visualize the man who changed the course of human history. In examining the broader history of Christian iconography, one finds that the physical image of Jesus has always served a symbolic function. From the catacombs of Rome, where early Christians painted Christ as the Good Shepherd with a lamb across his shoulders, to the golden mosaics of the Hagia Sophia, and the monumental frescoes of the Sistine Chapel, every artistic rendering tells a story not just of faith but of cultural identity. These images were shaped as much by theology as by the politics, philosophies, and aesthetic values of the societies that produced them. The description of Jesus found in Ioannis' letter, whether authentic or constructed later, embodies this intersection of religious truth and artistic expression. Its emphasis on Jesus' serenity, fairness, and grace underscores a deeply theological ideal, that divinity can dwell within human form without compromising either. The clear eyes, symmetrical features, and calm demeanor speak to the belief in Jesus as not just a prophet or teacher, but the embodiment of divine perfection on earth. Such portrayals reinforced the dual nature of Christ, fully human and fully divine, central to Christian doctrine since the Council of Chalcedon in AD 451. It is important to consider how the earliest Christian communities understood Jesus, especially those closest in time and culture to his life. The Jewish followers of the first century would have seen Jesus as a rabbi, a healer, and a revolutionary messianic figure, not through the lens of European artistic tradition, but through their own cultural symbols. The Gospel writers themselves, though recording miracles and signs, never dwelled on his physical traits. This omission may have been deliberate, placing the emphasis on his teachings, death, and resurrection, rather than his bodily appearance. Yet over time, as Christianity expanded beyond the Jewish world into Greek, Roman, and later European cultures, new images of Jesus emerged, shaped by the artistic conventions and spiritual needs of each period. In Byzantine art, for instance, Jesus was often portrayed as a regal, pantocrator, ruler of all, figure, with a penetrating gaze, halo, and elaborate robes emphasizing his divine authority and kingship. This was less about realism and more about conveying theological truths through symbolic imagery. In contrast, the Renaissance period witnessed a humanization of Christ. Artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael portrayed Jesus with intense emotional depth. These depictions aligned with the humanist ethos of the age, which sought to reconcile classical beauty with Christian spirituality. In this context, the physical features of Jesus took on even greater importance not because they were historically accurate, but because they conveyed the inner qualities of compassion, sacrifice, and redemption. The letter from Ioannis, then, can be seen as part of this continuum. Whether written in the early 1st century or crafted by medieval monks seeking to articulate a vision of Jesus that reflected their own spiritual ideals, the letter offers a compelling, vivid portrait. Descriptions such as his complexion compared to ripe corn, or his grey eyes were clear and penetrating, evoke not only physical characteristics but moral and emotional resonance. The use of color, symmetry, and posture all serve to underscore Jesus' role as the Redeemer not through power or intimidation, but through quiet strength and moral clarity. Interestingly, the emphasis on Jesus' eyes as both stern when rebuking but kind and loving in admonition aligns with many gospel narratives, in which his gaze communicates deeper truths. In Luke 22 verse 61, for instance, after Peter denies him 3 times, it is written that the Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, a moment that leads to Peter's bitter weeping.